Hi guys, my name is Lauren Yost. I teach microbiology at OSU OKC, and I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the importance of learning instead of just memorizing. So, how many of you guys have memorized stuff to take a test and then a week later just completely forgotten it? And we all have. It's actually kind of important though that we start to retain that information because a lot of this stuff that you're going to be learning in your science courses, we need to be able to apply it. So we can put some context into these things and put them into perspective of how this is going to affect people, our patients and their families if you're going into healthcare, or your clients if you're not. So I'm starting out with a little bit of a personal story. This picture is a picture of my sister, Erica. She's my younger sister. And when she was 29, she was diagnosed with colon cancer. And so she had part of her bowel resected. And when she was recovering in the hospital, the nurse had brought her some broth to ingest to see if her GI system could handle it. And my sister had been a vegetarian for 10 years, and the broth was beef broth. And so she requested that her nurse bring her some vegetarian broth if possible. And the nurse wasn't very happy with that. But there's a problem here. If this person has been vegetarian for 10 years and they ingest beef, well, that could cause inflammation or irritation in her gut. And it's already inflamed and irritated because we cut part of it out. So this could actually impede the healing process. So we've got to think bigger than just what you're told to do and just following what you're told. We need to understand why we're doing those things so we can be better advocates for our patients or our clients in whatever field that you're going into. It's really important to have an understanding of how our treatment affects things overall, not just one aspect, what we're told to do. So memorization, it gets us a short-term gain. It's great for memorizing new terms and going through lists, but it'll fade pretty quickly if we don't reinforce it. So real-world science is problem solving. It's adding context into the stuff that we memorize. So applying it and putting it into a perspective. So we're not just recalling the information, we're actually able to relate it to other things. Science exams, labs, and careers, including those that are in healthcare, will require you to apply concepts to new situations, and memorized facts aren't going to get you very far. So, for example, nurses should understand why penicillin won't work to treat an influenza virus infection. And we're actually going to come back to that a little bit later in the talk. So, how do we actually approach learning instead of just memorizing things? Um, I have three major concepts to help you guys guide yourselves through your learning process. And all of these work, and you can use any one of these or all of them in combination. Of course, I'd recommend all of them if you can. But the first one is ask. So always ask why and how. Anytime you answer a question on a quiz or a homework or exam, can you tell me why that right answer was right? Can you tell me why the other choices were wrong? Can you explain that to me? Why were these choices wrong and why is that one right? And do that every single time on everything. Take the time to understand the why and the how for any of your answers to anything that you do in the course. The next part is teaching, which is taking it to that next step. Explain it to somebody else. Science has shown that this is the most effective way to solidify learning and recall. So take the time to literally verbally out loud with your little voices explain the thing. I don't care if there's nobody to listen to you. Explain it to the wall, to your steering wheel, to your pillow, to your dog. I don't care, but verbalize it with your voice because science has shown that that is the best way to convey understanding and solidify understanding. And so if you have to think through a process and put it into words and actually speak it out loud, that's how you know that you're actually getting it. If you can put it into words and explain it, that shows you where you're able to understand things. If you can't quite word it or can't see how it's relating to what you're talking about, then you don't understand it and you have no business explaining it. So it's time to go back to that and take some of our more basic things, figuring out the whys and the hows, and maybe even revisiting some of that memorization before you start linking it in to where you can explain it. And then the linking part. I'm not just talking about linking concepts together, which I'm going to show you an example of in a moment, but also linking it to real world examples, such as the body's pH. It needs to remain between 7.35 and 7.45. What happens if it goes too low? How would that affect the body? How would that affect each of the molecules of the body? And what does it mean if it goes too low or too high? What's really happening? So these are some examples from my course. I have an assignment in my course that involves making concept maps like these. On the left here, we can see that a student used bubbles and colors to basically organize their ideas. All the green ideas are kind of related. The black ideas are kind of related, the yellow, and so on and so forth. So they organize their ideas in these sorts of color blocks in a way that relates those ideas to one another in major groupings. And then on the right over here, we have more blocking going on, where each of these blocks represents kind of a major concept from that chapter. And there's more subset information within each of those that explains the concepts even further. So these students have taken the time to organize out their thoughts for that chapter, see how they relate, and then given details on that stuff when they're taking their notes. But they've written their notes in their own language as well, which is important because they've taken the time to understand it well enough, they can reword it in their own words. And both of these students got easy A's in my class. So here's an example from my course. If I have two facts here, bacteria have cell walls made of peptidoglycan. Doesn't matter what it is right now. You'll learn that when you get to my course. Penicillin is an antibiotic. It's a drug that targets peptidoglycan synthesis. Okay, here's our question for memorization. If you just memorize and you rely on memorization, you can answer this one. Recall the function of peptidoglycan in bacterial cells. Well, peptidoglycan is what makes up bacterial cell walls. Easy enough, right? But now let's apply that information. So the question asks us, explain why penicillin is more likely to be effective at treating bacterial infections as opposed to viral infections. See, I told you I'd bring it full circle. And explain what might happen to bacterial cells after treatment. So if bacterial cell walls are made of peptidoglycan and penicillin targets peptidoglycan synthesis, then that means that whenever you take penicillin, the bacteria in your body aren't able to make their cell walls, right? What happens to them because of that is that they don't have that structure to maintain their shape. And a lot of times in bacteria, that structure is just as important as that function. So they often won't be able to replicate, they won't be able to cause an infection, they won't be able to multiply, they won't be able to increase their numbers and then lead to disease later on. However, viruses, they don't have cell walls of peptidoglycan. Neither do we. Bacteria have that. And so if we're taking a drug that targets peptidoglycan, it won't affect viruses because viruses don't have peptidoglycan to be affected. And so this is taking the basic concept. I can just make a statement that's a short sentence like this, putting it into and applying it to an actual scenario and being able to make sense of that. That's the level of understanding that I expect whenever you're learning any concept in any of your science courses. Especially when you come to my class, you're going to be a lot better off if you can learn this stuff, learn how to learn how to understand and apply before you come to my class, because otherwise you're going to be struggling. All right, so to summarize, memorize it can help you pass quizzes, can even help you pass tests, and maybe even whole courses. But understanding and applying will get you a lot further. You'll be a lot better at your job because it's not enough to pass a test, right? You have patients and their family relying on you to provide support and understanding in regards to providing health care, right? For their loved one, for their pet, whatever. And if you're not going into healthcare, then you have clients that are relying on you to understand your job well enough to provide them with the service that they're looking for. And so we can't just memorize and recall. We need to know our job in order to function appropriately, right? And know what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I provided some examples here. It's actually my own blood work. But down here, you see this yellow dot down here on this left graph. On this yellow one down here, you'd think that would be a low value, but I hate to break it to you, it's actually high. So when we come down here to the May 7th value, look at the range on this one, the 0.05. 0.015 to 0.5. It's a completely different range. We need to be moving that decimal point over in order to put this into perspective. And so this 2.3 isn't just 2.3, it's like a 2300. And so it would be up, way up here. And so high number of this cell, which happens to be a white blood cell. It's your eosinophil. It's one of the white blood cells that you have. But then this is a different way of looking at the data. What percentage of my white blood cells were just eosinophils? And you can see here, this gives you a different kind of trend to look at, that the percentage there can now be compared a little bit more differently. And so putting these things into perspective can then help you to diagnose your patient better, to see whatever's going on with them or whatever like that. So if you guys need help with learning and applying, you can always reach out to Dr. Tim or to me if you want to. Dr. Tim can give you my information if that's something that you're interested in. And the SSOC has great resources and great tutors there that can help you through any of this stuff. So please reach out to any of those resources if you need help with learning how how to learn. That is okay. The Oklahoma system doesn't set up students that well for that sort of success. So if you need help learning how to learn, there's no shame in that. Reach out, and I promise you will. It's so much easier to learn once you start making this a habit. And so I'm going to wish you guys the best luck with learning, the best luck with your courses this semester, and I hope I see you in the future.